Hello everyone, Mike the Warrior here, and today we're doing a different type of video. As the title says, we're going over the Bakugan Battle Brawlers and looking at what type of decks they would play if this was a Yu-Gi-Oh anime instead. Without further ado, let's get started because this is a long video. First things first, the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Kuso. Now some would assume that Drago, being his ace, would immediately have Dan to just use a big dragon deck. And at first, I considered the same. However, Drago is his ace, and that wasn't the case in the original. He used quite a few Bakugan besides Drago, so when I really thought about it, I wanted to go with Salamand Greats for Dan. For those who don't know, the Salamand Greats are a Link-based archetype that does go into the other mechanics as well, but mainly they're a Link deck. What are Link monsters? Don't ask, I don't want to get into that right now. All that you really need to know is that the deck has a very unique mechanic where it basically gives the Link monsters some extra effects if they're summoned with the same material. That being said, the main reason I want to give this to Dan is because of two reasons. One, the fact that it's a fire deck, Dan is Pyrus, makes sense. Two, more importantly, the deck recycles the monsters so you can go into more combos. Well, that is if you know what you're doing and, structure the deck properly and all that garbage, but the deck can recycle the monsters by basically going into the graveyard, resummoning them, or adding them back to your hand for later. This is important for Dan because Dan and Drago and, the Brawlers in general, went into the Doom Dimension to get their Bakugan back. It wasn't the real reason they went there, but it's something that they did do. And I think having that part of his legacy, his journey, be a part of the archetype is a pretty neat idea. And it does have a Dragon XC's monster, kinda. Monsters in here that, aren't dragons, and I'm giving it to Dan, is because Dan originally didn't just use Drago. He used various different Bakugan, like I said earlier. Now, if we wanted to give Dan a different archetype that wasn't just this one, I could see him getting Red Dragon Archfiend. I just think that this one kind of looks like Drago, specifically Delta Dragonoid, so I wouldn't mind if it went here, and the Salamand Greats did get Link monsters later on. I'm sorry, a Synchro monster later on. But if you want to abandon the Link aspect of the deck and focus more on the resonators, then yeah, you could just do that and have Dan work with that deck as well. And a personal pick for mine is the Odd Eyes archetype. To quickly sum this up, because I think I am staying a little too long on the first character, it's Dan, but still. The Odd Eyes archetype does take a minute to properly set up because it's something called pendulums. Again, don't ask. But what's so cool about Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon in itself is the fact that it has a version of itself with every different summon mechanic. So it has its normal effect variant, its pendulum variant, a fusion monster, multiple fusion monsters, multiple synchros, XCs, and not that long ago, a ritual monster. And this can be a nice way to represent Drago's various evolutions throughout the series. Personally, it's my number one pick. Granted, Dan could just use all of these. It's very common for someone to just constantly change up their deck, or even change decks in the Yu-Gi-Oh show. So if Dan was in there, I could imagine him doing the same thing. Especially because, he just stays the entire time. Through every single season, he's just there. So it just makes sense that, okay, as time goes on, he's going to start playing a new deck. Keep things fresh, Next, we're going to have the original Deuteragonus. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong. Anyway, we're going to go into Bruno. Bruno used Chaos. For those who don't know, that's light. But in terms of theme and her strategies, I would give her the Amazoness deck. The Amazons are warrior women-based monsters, and they do have some extra beasts inside of the archetype as well. The ace monster, Amazoness Queen, stops them from being destroyed, and I think that's a really, really good symbolism for Bruno's character. In the dub, at least, she stated that she formed a new strategy because she was tired of losing her Bakugan to the Doom Dimension. And I could imagine her finalizing her plays when she creates the Amazoness pet Liger and Amazonas Empress combo. Basically, you're only allowed to attack Amazonas Pet Liger when it's on the field, and Amazonas Empress, like Amazonas Queen, stops it from being destroyed. So you have a pretty good setup. Plus, there's a bunch of other cards that you can use as well. But if you didn't want to go with this one, because again, she uses light monsters, and if you want to go more in terms of the attribute accuracy, you do have some options, but I think the best case, in my opinion, would be the Armortos Legion archetype from Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns. I say that specifically because, unfortunately, this one hasn't actually been printed yet. But what the Armortos Legions basically did is they were a link-based deck, and they had a bunch of unique effects, depending if they were co-linked or not. Okay, I said I wasn't going to go into links, but I will, just for the sake of knowing what that means. You see these arrows. If these two arrows point to each other, then your monsters are co-linked. If the arrow points to this monster and this monster has a different arrow that points somewhere else, then okay, they're not co-linked. Anyway, this amount of tag team and combo is reminiscent of Bruno's strategy, like I said before. So I think it would be really, really good. If you wanted to imagine which version of the deck or which version of these monsters would Bruno play first and then she would switch to another one later, I'll leave that up to you. I think both fit her really well. And, I mean, maybe she could just play them both. Not at the same time, because that really isn't consistent. But, I mean, maybe one day she decides she's going to play with the Armortos Legions, and the other day she's going to play with Amazons. It's possible. Anyway, that's Bruno. Marucho is kind of hard for me to do. There are a ton of water decks, and I don't really play any of them like that. But I'll try my best. The easiest answer would be the shark deck / fish deck. You know, the one that, well, Reginald / Nash uses in Zexal. If you think that fits Marucho or not, I'll leave that up to you. It's a water deck. He uses a lot of fish-based monsters because, well, he's Aquas. Another option, if you want to show him using a bit more powerful monsters leading to the end of the series, would be, I guess, Tearlaments. I'm not entirely sure if that fits Marucho, but it's an option. But if you want to go for something that kind of fits a theme for him, and this is a big maybe, we're going to look at Reigns one more time, and I'm going to point to another deck that hasn't been printed yet, and that is the Hydrodrive deck. This was used by Bowman, and what the Hydrodrives basically do is go into various link monsters, and depending on the material's attributes that was used to summon that monsters, those new monsters acquire that effect. So let's just say you had Flow Hydrodrive and Burn Hydrodrive. One's wind, one's fire. They are both sent to the graveyard to be material for Twin Hydrodrive Knight. Twin Hydrodrive Knight is now fire and wind at the exact same time. And that fits Marucho perfectly for the sole reason that he's the original battler who started using Bakugan that could change their attributes on the fly. Now, Bowman uses it to basically build a negate board. I'm not entirely sure if that's how Marucho would go about things, but this is a completely different game than what he's used to, so I'll leave that for you guys to decide. My point is that Marucho does have a lot of options, as water decks, from my experience, can be pretty powerful. I can't think off the top of my head of a water deck that I think is just straight up awful. Now, granted, I'm not a competitive player. I'm super, super casual. Like, when Master Duel and Duel Links showed up, the first thing I wanted to do is recreate every single deck I could remember from the show, but I don't want to get into that right now. My point being is, if you can think of any better decks that you think fit Marucho like a glove, feel free to let me know. Oh, well, I did remember one, because we later have the Mactanium Surge where they get Mectagon and stuff. I don't know if this entirely fits him, but he is a techno dude. So there's this bear water-based deck, which is built entirely off of tributing cards and whatnot. You tribute them from the hand and their quick effects to basically special summon them. The tuners get a bunch of back row effects that you can use on your opponent's turn, or either turn, really. And the non-tuners are the, I think, level 7 monsters. My point being is the bear mech deck, as I've now called it, it could be an interesting pick for Marucho, because while, again, he mainly uses fish, he's a big techno dude, so I could see him playing this deck. Anyway, that's Marucho. Let me know in the comments if you guys have a better one. Let's move on. Shun, we have a very, very easy pick. There's an actual ninja deck. And as a big Naruto fan, I do want to tell you that if you think ninjas are the type of people who go around beating people up on top of rooftops and using all these crazy shenanigans, that's not really what ninjas are. Ninjas, well, at least most ninjas, were strictly assassins. And I bring this up to say that the actual ninja deck is full of flip effect monsters. Now, someone who really knows what they're doing can be really annoying with how to get rid of these monsters, because when they're face down, okay, you're probably going to think, well, that's nothing to worry about. But you'd be wrong, and you're going to be in for a bad time if you don't know what you're dealing with. But if you don't want to just go with the easy option, there is another one. I believe they're called the Gusto deck, and I could imagine this being Shun's deck for the very beginning of the series, because, well, they're this bird synchro deck, green, wind attribute, like, it fits him like a glove in terms of, you know, the Skyrus stuff. And it has a unique effect once you really get your combo going, where your opponents take the damage you would have taken. And Shun was a very big strategy guy, so I could easily imagine him doing this. Another option, if you want to go somewhere else, would be maybe Raidaptors. I didn't think of this one, but my brother had brought it up when I was jotting down some ideas. It is an option as well. What Raidaptors basically are is they are Xyz monsters. Basically, as I've been saying material throughout this video, when you use 2 cards to summon something, they stay attached to that card as material. And most Xyz monsters need to send that material that's attached to them to the graveyard to use their effects. So let's just say I had 2 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. I use them so I can Xyz summon Galaxy Eyes Cypher Dragon. To use its effect, I have to remove one of the blue eyes and send it to the graveyard so I can then use its effect. Anyway, Raidaptors is an Xyz deck, and they are really, really powerful because they have something called rank up cards, which basically allows you to upgrade your monster into something else for free most of the time. And they have something called Ultimate Falcon, which is immune to pretty much everything. And it's a really good beat stick, since it has a lot of attack points. Now, originally, this is where I ended it with Shun, but when I was about done with the video, I realized something else. So, let's just say we're in the mindset where Shun does change his deck up a lot. I think a perfect place to end it would be the Black Wings. The Assault variant of the Black Wings have a lot more samurai-esque aesthetic to them, but I think that works for Shun. I'm not trying to confuse ninjas and samurai, but Shun did end up using Dark Bakugan. He had 1 Ventus and 2 Darkest, like, dogs, I believe, by the end of Mactanium Surge, and I think it would symbolize his growth, you know. Started off with the bird thing, then went to ninjas, went a bit more on the mechanical side with the birds, with the Raidaptors. Now he has the Blackwing, and it's just everything into one to an extent. While it's not Xyz, Blackwings are really powerful, can go up into even more powerful Xyz, or I'm sorry, Synchro monsters later on. They're really, really good. Just trust me on that. Blackwings is super popular. Like, they always get support. Next, we have Julie. She is Subterra, so Earth monsters. And there are quite a few options, but I'm going to just keep it simple. She's using Ancient Gears. Why? There's a card called Ancient Gear Golem. That could be her ace, but she could go into the other cards later on. She's using Ancient Gears. Let's move on. Next, we have probably the hardest one when I was making this entire list, Masquerade. Okay, so obviously we have Hydrodrive, and I could be a basic bitch and say Blue Eyes, because, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon makes a lot of sense. Some people would nitpick and point out the elephant in the room that that's the exact opposite of Dark, because Blue Eyes is light monsters, and I'd agree. Now, I originally wanted to have the Hydrodrive be Masquerade instead of Marucho, and that was, well, the control aspect of it definitely seems like a strategy he would play. And I believe it's Hydrodrive Dragars is the ultimate boss monster. Like, that definitely seems like something Masquerade would end up doing. And some could also bring up Cyber Dragons, but I don't want to do that because I just think that fits Shadow Probe more. It's mechanical, multi-headed dragons. And then at that point, I was kind of at a loss on what to do. But I settled on another Link deck, and this time it's the Rocket Monsters. Their dark attributes, they're really hard to get rid of if you don't really know what you're up against, because they have unique effects when they're the target of an effect and they're linked to a monster. Not only that, but when they're destroyed at the end of the turn, they get to summon another card from the deck. Its field spell boost extra launch allows you to just summon from your hand. But if you summon for your graveyard and your opponent has more monsters, you can summon till you make up the difference. And then there is the Boral Link monsters, the bosses of the deck. Borolo Dragon, which attack can't be negated, which seems kind of perfect for Masquerade, if you think about it. He was just this unstoppable force, and its ultimate boss monster, as of now, Boral End Dragon, is a 3-headed beast. So, yeah, it does fit him. Next, we have Alice, and she didn't really battle much. I could just give her the options I had for Masquerade, but I think in the context of this being a Yu-Gi-Oh! And not a Bakugan, there's a really strong chance she would just end up building her own deck. And I think Galaxy Eyes fits her. While, yes, she's Darkest, and again, Galaxy Eyes is a different attribute. Just give me a second. Because she's like the pure version of Masquerade, even though, again, she's supposed to be Darkest, I get it. I just imagine her using a light attribute deck. And if she did play the same deck as Masquerade, then she's going all in on Blue Eyes. Like, maybe Masquerade could start with a Blue Eyes deck, or just have a deck that just so happens to have Blue Eyes in it, and she'd contribute a bit more to it. Like, maybe she's the one who plays Chaos Max Dragon, or Deep Eyes. But back to the Galaxy Eyes, it has a 3-headed dragon, like Hydronoid, and I could see if we get into the new Vestroya side of things and she upgraded her deck a bit, she would go into the Tachyon Dragon with some Cypher Dragon plays as well. And it's just my opinion, but I think the Cypher deck in the anime is much more optimal and powerful than the one we have in real life. Granted, that's because a lot of those support cards are completely different. Well, not completely, but they haven't been printed, and some of them do have different effects. And since I'm already here, might as well throw her grandfather in there and say how G runs Sacred Beasts. What are the Sacred Beasts? They're basically Walmart versions of the Egyptian God cards. Though, surprisingly, they're more consistent and you can actually play all of them in one deck. And a really good deck with the Sacred Beasts can be a lot to get through, and the fact that their final boss monster can get a bunch of attack points fits, well, not even Hal G, but Naga, because Naga, at least in my opinion, was a really powerful final boss, and I think in Universe it actually took a while for him to be surpassed in terms of how strong the villains got. This is kind of hilarious. I wrote this later on when I thought of it, when I was practically done with the script, and I had it in here to, basically talk about this when I was discussing Alice. So while I could just have this around this part where I had remembered, I'm just gonna squeeze it in now. But I think the best definitive deck for Alice would be the Dragars deck. Now, this is in the Rush Duel format of Yu-Gi-Oh! It was debuted in Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, and it's a different format of the game entirely, if I'm being honest. But all you need to know is I think this fits Alice really well because it's really powerful in the Rush Duel, format. At least it could be, let me put it that way. And the ultimate boss monster that didn't debut in the show, but it does have a maximum. I'm not going to get into that yet, but it has a 3-headed dragon, and again, it fits the Hydrodrive stuff. I could just see Alice playing this deck, and I think she would have a lot of fun with it. Anyway, moving on. And with that, we're going to go ahead and call it here. I originally went back on what I planned to do and ended up doing more than just the Battle Brawlers, and some of them are recorded, but this video is a little over 30 minutes long, so I think I'll just have this one be here for now, and depending on the reception, I'll go back and finish recording some of the others I had jotted down. I do want to do some actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Content on the channel, but it's not gonna be what you're probably thinking. It is still a Bakugan channel, as I always say, but maybe this could ease into it. Without further ado, I'm Mike the Warrior. Let me know your thoughts on the decks I've chosen. Do you have better ones? Be sure to like and subscribe as well, and I'll catch you next time.